Today we're going to talk about something truly radical, the Enlightenment foundations of the United States Constitution. Radical in the original sense of the word, from the roots. And the roots of our Constitution are firmly planted in Enlightenment political philosophy, natural rights theory, and, perhaps most importantly, a deep, abiding suspicion of human nature. The founders did not believe people were angels. If they had, we wouldn't need a constitution. We'd need a group hug and maybe a drum circle. Instead, they gave us separation of powers, federalism, and checks and balances, all elegant ways of saying power is dangerous, so let's divide it before it divides us. First, Enlightenment thought and natural rights. The intellectual backbone of the Constitution comes from Enlightenment thinkers, most notably John Locke, Montesquieu, and David Hume. John Locke argued that individuals are born with natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and that governments exist not to grant rights, but to secure them. That's a crucial distinction. Rights do not come from Congress, the courts, or Twitter trends. They exist prior to government. The Declaration of Independence lays this out clearly, but the Constitution operationalizes it. The Constitution is not a manifesto about what government should do for you. It's a rule book about what government is not allowed to do to you. That, by the way, is a very conservative insight. Next, separation of powers. Ambition versus ambition. The founders borrowed heavily from Montesquieu, who argued that liberty depends on separating political power into distinct branches. So the Constitution divides power among three branches: legislative, or the Congress; executive, or the president; judicial, or the court system. This is not because the founders loved bureaucracy. It's because they loved liberty and feared concentrated power. Which brings us neatly to Federalist Number 51, written by James Madison, and arguably the most famous of them all. Federalist Number 51, Madison famously writes, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. Consequently, if men were devils, no government would be sufficient." That line alone should be carved above every political science classroom. Madison argues that because human beings are flawed, government must be designed so that power checks power. He explains, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. In other words, don't trust virtue, structure the system so self-interest restrains self-interest. Each branch has constitutional weapons against the others: vetoes, confirmations, judicial review. This isn't gridlock, it's liberty preservation. The Constitution assumes conflict and channels it productively. That's wisdom, not dysfunction. Third, federalism, dividing power vertically. If separation of powers divides government horizontally, federalism divides it vertically, between the national government and the states. The founders did not want a centralized national authority swallowing local governance. They had just fought a war over that idea. This brings us to Federalist Number 39, again written by Madison. Federalist Number 39. The central question here is, what kind of government is the Constitution creating? Madison's answer, partly national, partly federal. He explains that the House represents the people nationally, the Senate represents the states, the president is chosen through a mix of national and state mechanisms. Amendments require both state and national consent. Madison writes that the Constitution is neither wholly national nor wholly federal. This hybrid system prevents consolidation of power while allowing effective governance. It's a carefully engineered balance, something modern political debates tend to ignore in favor of slogans. Además, fourth, Federalist Number 10, the problem of faction. Now let's turn to Federalist Number 10, Madison's masterclass on political realism. The problem? Faction. Groups driven by passion or self-interest, willing to sacrifice the public good. Sound familiar? Madison argues that factions are inevitable because liberty allows people to think differently. So instead of eliminating factions, which would require eliminating liberty, he proposes controlling their effects. His solution is brilliant: a large republic. In a large, diverse republic, no single faction can dominate. Competing interests check each other. Extreme views are diluted through representation. Madison writes, extend the sphere and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. Fifth, Federalist Number 49, caution against constant appeals to the people in Federalist Number 49. Madison addresses a tempting but dangerous idea: frequent appeals to the people to resolve constitutional disputes. Now, Madison believes deeply in popular sovereignty, but he also believes in stability. He warns that constant appeals would undermine respect for the Constitution, inflame public passions, make government dependent on momentary impulses. In short, Madison feared politics driven by emotion rather than reason. He argues that constitutional change should be deliberate and difficult, not impulsive. This is not anti-democratic. It's pro-constitutional. Next, Federalist number 84, why there was no Bill of Rights at first. Finally, we come to Federalist number 84, written by Alexander Hamilton, where he makes what was then a controversial argument. The Constitution doesn't need a Bill of Rights. Hamilton argues that since the federal government has only enumerated powers, it has no authority to violate rights it was never granted. He famously writes, "Why declare that things shall not be done which there is no power to do?" Hamilton worried that listing rights could imply that unlisted rights didn't exist. Now, history intervened. The Anti-Federalists won this debate politically, and the Bill of Rights was added, thankfully. But Hamilton's argument reinforces an important principle: limited government comes first. And that brings us full circle to the 10th Amendment, the capstone of federalism. The 10th Amendment states that powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states or the people. This is not a footnote. It is a constitutional boundary marker. The amendment reinforces the founders' belief that liberty is safer closer to the people. Centralization is a threat to self-government. Federal power must remain limited and enumerated. This is Enlightenment thinking in action, reason applied to political structure. How the Federalist Papers ensured ratification. The Federalist Papers were not academic exercises. They were political persuasion, written to convince New Yorkers and others that this Constitution deserved ratification. They clarified how power would be divided, why liberty would be protected, why this system was safer than both monarchy and direct democracy, and they worked. We have a Constitution built for real humans. The genius of the Constitution is not that it assumes people are good, but that it assumes people are human. It channels ambition, restrains power, protects rights, and balances authority across institutions and levels of government. It is not perfect, but it is profoundly wise. And unlike most modern political documents, it has lasted not because it promises outcomes, but because it limits power. That is the Enlightenment legacy of the United States Constitution, and why it remains worthy of admiration today.